Lessons from the screen, what we mean is we go through different documentaries to tell you what they gon' do. Give you our lessons, give them our blessings. If they trash, we tell you there is no second guessing. Knowledge is power, but time is precious. And we're here to keep you from them lessons. So sit back as we groove, giving you the review, so you only spend time on the dots that you need to.
Welcome back to another episode of Lessons from the Screen, the show where we give you a review of whether or not a show, a documentary, or anything you can get through any particular screen is worth watching. We waste our time, our energy, and our brain power so that you don't have to. You're welcome. Lessons from the Screen is brought to you by PAX Inc. through the Freedom Train Network. You can find us at www.freedomtrainradio.com or on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a review. Be sure to leave us a comment. We like comments. We like interactions. And then be sure to head to www.paxinc.org to show some love and support for our sponsors. PAX Inc. is a black activist and advocacy organization focused on developing the black community through a shift in culture, education, and economics. As always, Lessons from the Screen has a frame of reference and perspective that is aligned with that of the black community. So the things we look at will be looked at with the racial component involved and with some lessons that can be used to improve the community. This week on Lessons from the Screen, we will be looking at the Independence Day Project, a documentary film that seeks to change the way black people look at our struggle for equality. It does this by shifting the narrative away from all the problems we face at the hands of white supremacy and plants the narrative directly on the black community and things we can do now to change our situation. The film looks at the 10 areas of human activity and gives us a little something to swallow and ponder on all of them. As usual, we will look at this film, our likes, our dislikes, and its potential impact. In this episode of Lessons from the Screen, we will be looking at the Independence Day Project. So after years of working on this project, this documentary, on 18 February 2018, Professor Carl Tone Jones unveiled the Independence Day Project to the world in its world premiere. He had a screening before that, but this one was considered the world premiere. Now, the Independence Day Project is essentially a documentary about black liberation in modern times in America. And while it does have several Pan-Africanist speaking and expresses several Pan-Africanist views, the scope of the film is largely centered in the realm of black nationalism. Now, before we move forward, we got to define these terms because I know a lot of you might not be familiar with them. Pan-Africanism can be described or defined as a movement that seeks to unify all peoples of African origin all over the world. Marcus Garvey is a great example of a Pan-Africanist. If you want to Google him, look him up, what he did, things of that nature, you get a pretty good, solid idea of what Pan-Africanism seeks to achieve. Now, black nationalism can be described as a movement in America that seeks to empower black people politically, economically, and socially to resist white supremacy and assimilation and maintain an independent cultural identity. So Malcolm X would be a great example of a black nationalist. It's almost as if you could say we wanted to create a nation within a nation of black people within the overall nation of America. And that would be, in that view, is completely independent of what other culture groups have going on. And that would be an idea of a black nationalist. So the film has more than 15 activists and advocates from all over the country flashing across the screen over the 2-hour runtime, which represents a very diverse group of perspectives and thoughts on the subjects in question. And speaking of the subjects in question, the film covers the 9 major areas of human activity according to compensatory logic made popular in the pro-black community by Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. And those areas are economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, and counterwar. That's war/counterwar. Now, the documentary added a 10th overarching area for culture because you can't talk about all of these things in a vacuum. They exist within a network or they exist within a context of things, and that overall context is culture. So while and it is important to state that while not all of these subjects were touched on directly, they are all hit on to some degree indirectly, with culture and war taking up the lion's share of the film. Now, the very first thing to say about this film is that this is a radical film on several levels. Some of the commentators make statements that can't be seen as anything but radical. This is not your safe black documentary or film by any stretch of the imagination. However, this is a documentary that makes its radical nature very appealing in a lot of areas. And while it does seem at times to go too far for some people, I'm sure that's going to happen. As a whole, I think that it presents its radical nature in a generally acceptable and understandable way. Now, again, this is not a safe film. This film is going to present context and ideas and content in a way that is going to make some people uncomfortable, is going to make a lot of people afraid. It's not a safe film. I want to reiterate that. But it is a film that I do believe makes the very nature of what it's talking about, especially in these modern times, appealing to the masses that can sit through being presented with information that they may have never heard of or may have never thought about or completely disagree with. It presents the information in an appealing and acceptable way. So the next thing that has to be said is that this is not a historical documentary. Now, while there are a lot of moments where history is talked about, the general scope of the documentary is forward-leaning. It's philosophically focused on getting to a place in the future. So the guests aren't being asked to look back at some past event or to recall major shifts in history. They are being asked to look forward and to provide a vision of what could be possible and to provide a roadmap for how to get there. Now, moving forward, this idea of creating a new black world free of white supremacy as a concept isn't new. Books, articles, satire, comedy videos. The most recently popular one was the Key and Peele Blackland sketch that was popular all over social media and everywhere as part of their Comedy Central sketch comedy show. But this idea of a black world free of white supremacy isn't new. But to my knowledge, this is the first time that we have had a documentary seriously look at how to create it. Not just creating one amazing portion of society where we're thriving in economics or we're thriving in education or this, that, and the third, but an amazing society as a whole for black people. Now, with that being said, you aren't going to find any statistics or figures in this film which points to the philosophical nature of the project as based more on a vision of a future world. And this makes the roadmap given a little blurry, but for some, this is enough. For others, they're going to want those numbers. But for some, they don't need the numbers to see the vision. And they don't need the numbers to see how to get there. But I do want to state that for those of you who are accustomed to a certain type of documentary film, presenting statistics, stats, figures, numbers, things like that, this isn't that. It's not that. I don't think I saw any statistics throughout the entire 2-hour runtime, any numbers whatsoever. Now, the film flows seamlessly from one topic to another, meaning that it's very easy to lose track of what section you're supposed to be in, but the information and ideas presented are conveyed smoothly throughout the entire project. So while you might not know when exactly the film transitioned from, say, culture to economics, you do grasp hold of the concepts very fluidly as it transitions from culture to economics and as it transitions through to various other sections. Now, the project is over 2 hours, and while the first hour is kind of slow, it is, unless you're in the culture, and I am, so I love the first hour. The second hour is where it really picks up steam, and as much as I liked the first hour and its focus on culture, even I have to admit that the second hour is where this thing really shines. It's where it really comes out. It becomes more upbeat. The conversation gets more direct on subjects that people need to talk about, but they're uncomfortable talking about. Even the music transitions well to account for and assist in the increasing excitement. You know, the second half of the film is focused more on direct action, on warfare and counter warfare, narratives and ideas presented along the lines of land development, resistance. This idea of poverty is dug into more deeply, going into the middle of the first hour and the start of the second hour of the film. The idea of sovereignty is addressed, education, all of these things begin to be spoken to with more immediacy and directness in the second hour of the film. And for many, this is where the radical nature of the documentary really begins to showcase itself. And for many, this is when the film is going to become scary. I think most everybody will be able to tolerate and digest the first hour pretty quickly, pretty easily. The second hour is where you're going to begin to look at your soul and wonder what's there. The second hour is really going to be the hour where you begin to question a lot of the things you believe, question the sanity of the world we live in, and question the sanity of the people speaking in the film as well as the filmmaker that put it together. We got to be honest about that, because there are a lot of people that are going to get to the second hour and be like, what the hell is this? But that's there. But the second hour, the excitement, the mood, everything kind of picks up and turns over.